journalist, of course, who's just been in Congress since 2020, I think, a purebred lightweight and a racist. In the case, as you said, I'm glad you evoked Gerald. Cuba outlawed enslavement the same year, I think, as Brazil, the last two countries to do it in the Western Hemisphere, 1888. The United States would have made Cuba a colony of its own in the Spanish-American War, and people don't know that it was the Cuban-Spanish War. They were fighting to put the Spanish out, and the United States said they're going to help them, but they really wanted to colonize them. They eventually did establish a little toehold colony they still have. It's called Guantanamo Bay. The Cubans have had their own internal problems with race, certainly. Batista, that regime, being one of the cases. But as you say, when Castro came to power in 1959, they made great leaps forward in terms of race. And Afro-Cubans have been at the heart of Cuban culture, as you say, the spiritual systems, Santeria. When you look at the question of Cuban culture, Africa is at the heart of it. And since the 1950s, and since certainly 1959, you have Castro coming to Harlem and meeting with Malcolm X at the Hotel Teresa. He insisted on staying at the Hotel Teresa. He did not go to the Waldorf Astoria when he came to the United Nations. He was open to, of course, partnership with the Soviet Union. And that, of course, is where Salazar, who can't spell the word communist, would use communist as a kind of red herring as Lauren says, make progress in her fundraising and her race baiting. And so, for them, being a communist is the worst thing in the world. And so we don't have time, of course, to go through all the history, but Cuba was on the right side of South Africa, which is why when Nelson Mandela went on his world tour and visited Yasser Arafat in Palestine and then went to Cuba for Fidel Castro, when he came to the United States and they tried to put pressure on him not to talk to them, he said, your enemies are not my enemies. And there were many black people, including Barbara Lee from the Bay Area, who stood strong in solidarity with the Cuban people as they fought the tyranny of the United States of America. Not an easy thing to do in Congress, particularly when members of your own party would turn against you. Finally, Barbara Lee met with Fidel Castro. I believe this has been around maybe 2006, 2007. And I don't know that she didn't meet with Assata Shakur. I don't know, because, of course, people like Big Chris Christie would love to have the woman he calls Joanne Chesimard back here. But that ain't going to happen, baby. By the way, the freedom fighter who made transition in the first days of the year, I'm talking about, of course, the great Sekou Odinga. I share the great Sekou Odinga. But Salazar, at the end of the day, represents the type of anti-black racism that doesn't just speak English, it also speaks Spanish. And as you say, Cuba, the question of Cuba. Black people naming their children Maceo after Antonio Machado, the bronze titan of the Spanish-American War. James Brown, saxophone player, didn't just get that name. That's a Cuban name, Machado. And so Maceo is how we would call it here. All the way up to this day, solidarity with Cuba and the Afro-Cubans especially is a hallmark of revolutionary black folk. And Barbara Lee is about as revolutionary as you can get in the United States Congress, and it's a badge of honor to be thrown out by that racist white nationalist, Salazar.
All right, folks, hold tight 1 second. When we come back, we'll talk DEI. Conservatives are attacking it left and right, but one black conservative says they're all wrong. We'll discuss that next on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
On
On a Next, A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, we talk about a hard, cold fact. Not all healthcare is created equal in this country, especially if you're a person of color.
So many of us, Black families, we rely upon each other heavily. A lot of us aren't necessarily sure how to best communicate with our healthcare providers.
How to take charge and balance the scales. Your life may depend on it. That's next on A Balanced Life on Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, nurses are the backbone of the healthcare industry, and yet only 7% of them are Black. What's the reason for that low number? Well, a lack of opportunities and growth in their profession. Joining us on the next Get Wealthy is Needy Bartanillich. She's going to be sharing exactly what nurses need to do and what approach they need to take ownership of their success.
So the Black Nurse Collaborative really spawned from a place and a desire to create opportunities to uplift each other, those of us in the profession, to also look and reach back and create pipelines and opportunities for other nurses like us.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Next on The Frequency, we're talking about racism. My guest, Danica Moore, comes on to discuss her fight against racism that she and her daughter face.
The thing about racism, you can't outrun it, you can't control it, you can't predict when